I want to start by saying thank you to all of you for planning on attending Advocacy Day. We've got a really great team here at RVIA on the government affairs side, including Chris, Sam, and David, who are working on federal issues for us, as well as Mike, Sophie, and Christian on the state side, and Colleen making sure all the trains run on time. But what really moves the needle is constituents and business owners and business leaders like all of you taking time out of your schedule to come to DC to make your voices heard. And I think my colleagues would agree with me that that is a huge important factor in us moving our legislative priorities forward. So thank you again to all of you for taking the time this afternoon, and also for coming to DC in just a few short weeks, and we look forward to seeing you. Before we get into logistics, I want to introduce Molly Cannon. Molly is with Serini Sammet and Associates. Serini Sammet is our trade lobbyist. So Sam Rossi works with them day in and day out on our issues like GSP, competitive need limitations, and de minimis. But this year, Serini's also handling Advocacy Day for us. So they are scheduling all the meetings, putting together materials, and serving as our consultant on Advocacy Day. So before we dive into all the logistics, I want to introduce Molly to share a little bit about where we are in the process and what you can expect next week. Molly?
Thank you, Jason. Hi, I'm Molly Cannon, Director of Scheduling and Office Management from Serini Sammet and Associates. 30th, I will be sending out calendar invites to you all, so make sure to be accepting those. It'll have all the information you need for per meeting. Right now, we're making good progress on meetings scheduled. Currently, we have 40 meetings, and we're expecting more next week and following.
Thanks, Molly. And I just want to highlight, and you'll hear this from us over and over and over again, there is not an app for folks' schedules this year. So as Molly mentioned, next Thursday, she will be sending out calendar invites to individuals, guides, and advocates with your meeting. So next Thursday, when you start receiving emails from Molly, please accept those. That's going to put together your schedule, and as she said, talking points and backgrounders for the individual meetings will be included in those calendar invites. If for some reason you accidentally delete one or anything like that, don't worry about it. We have systems in place. We'll be working through guides and elsewhere to make sure you have your full schedule. David and I will have the master schedule, so we'll be able to confirm all of that. But when you do start receiving emails from Molly next Thursday, please make sure you're going through and accepting those. Thanks again, Molly. So a few things we want to talk about on the logistics side. Thursday, June 6th is the 80th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. And the House of Representatives is leaving Wednesday morning of Advocacy Day. That's when last votes will be. And so a lot of our meetings that might typically be, because there's a number of members of Congress traveling to Normandy for the commemoration, so a number of our meetings that would typically be at the member level are going to be at the staff level, unfortunately. But the good news is, and I think folks that have done this for a few years with us know, staff is truly who gets the work done on Capitol Hill. And so having time with them is incredibly valuable, and in some cases more valuable. than, a quick hit and run with the member. The good news is that we've gotten assurances from a couple of House members that they're going to be sticking around for the reception to come by and greet everybody. And the latest information that we have is that the Senate will be in through Thursday the 6th, so we'll be able to get some member meetings on the Senate side. Wednesday mornings can be busy on Capitol Hill with committee hearings and visitors. So make sure you plan for about 10 minutes at least to get through security and use all entrances, especially those not on Constitution and Independence avenues. We'll be doing a visit to Capitol Hill for DC-based guides next Wednesday. And one of the things we'll be highlighting is the different entrances off the main avenues for those buildings. For those that have done this before, you know that the most efficient way to get through the buildings once you're in on either the House or Senate side is to go through the tunnels. If you get lost or don't know where you're going or where you're headed, don't hesitate to ask a Capitol police officer or staff in the office. They are, to a person, incredibly helpful and friendly. And your guides, as part of their walkthrough next week, will be walking through the different signage. There's tons of signage throughout the building. So you do have to go outside the building to go from the House to the Senate or vice versa in most cases. So you will have to go through security again when doing that. What to expect meeting logistics. Don't be surprised if you have to wait a few minutes. Don't be surprised or offended if you meet in a hallway or stairwell. House offices especially are very small and don't have a lot of meeting space. It's typically either the member's office or the chief of staff's office or a round table in the entranceway. So don't be offended if it's out in the hallway or down in the cafeteria or something like that. That's kind of par for the course. I think one of the most important things is reading the room, right? Most of these folks will be very happy to see you, very excited to hear from you about not only the industry's priorities, but about your company's and what you do and things like that. Unfortunately, that's not universally true, and it's really important to read the room. So if they seem distracted, rush, or have given key cues, closing their notebook, saying, I'm sorry, I've got to run to a next meeting, things like that, follow those cues. Don't feel the need to ensure that all talking points are delivered if you're getting those signs. It's funny, I've always used the closing their notebook cue as an example. I'd never really experienced it until I was in a meeting a few weeks ago. And the person who was running the meeting literally closed her notebook while people kept talking. And I can't tell you how ineffective that is. It will be on us on the government affairs team to follow up with these offices and go deeper into issues and things like that. So don't worry about, again, getting through all the talking points. It's more about building that relationship and getting some key points across. Again, don't be surprised if staff is young. They often are. And like I said about House members leaving to early on Wednesday, don't be offended if a member meeting becomes a staff meeting. Staff are the ones that gets things done. Members will get called away for any number of things, despite their best intentions. Especially for guides or those advocates without guides. If you are running late to a meeting, please contact Molly or I. All guides will have my cell phone and email, and we'll make sure you have Molly's as well, so that we can contact the next office to let you know that let them know, excuse me, that you're running late. Similarly, if you get a phone call or a text from Molly or I, that should be a priority to respond to, or get back to us if you're in the middle of a meeting, because it's most likely a scheduling change that you and your group need to be aware of. Everybody will have talking points, and we'll both print it out in the pocket card that we typically use, as well as electronically attached to your calendar, your meeting invites. And absolutely, we want you to be talking about those key pieces of legislation. But it's also really important to talk about you and your company, about what you do, where you're based, how many employees you have, things like that. That's really that really helps bring the message home. And again, share real life examples, especially if you're a constituent, which many of you will be in your meetings. Always introduce yourself, exchange business cards at the beginning. Included in the background of your calendar invites will be, excuse me, our economic impact data for that state or congressional district. It's always a good idea to try and weave that information into your conversation. Again, don't worry if you don't get through everything, or if you forget to mention something. You won't be tested on it. It happens all the time. It's where everybody's readout of the meeting is really important, so that our team knows when we go back to see Congresswoman X, we know what you all talked about, and we can follow right up on that. You cannot thank the member or staff enough for taking time to meet with you. I always like to say, most Hill offices are under-resourced and understaffed. So, if you're meeting with a member of the staff, they probably have 4 to 5 to 6 of these types of meetings that day. Their boss might have a committee hearing that they have to prepare him or her for and be at. They might have a press hit that they're helping with. They might be writing letters or evaluating legislation or drafting legislation. So it's always incredibly important to thank them for their time. You will get questions, and you will not know the answer to that. And that is totally fine. Again, I was in a meeting a few weeks ago, didn't know the answer to a question, said, I'm not really sure, but I'll get back to you. Witnesses say that all the time. That is perfectly acceptable, and it's preferred to saying, making something up or skirting around it. And just mark that in your follow-up so that we can get back to that member or staff member with an answer to that question. And then if you're comfortable, feel free to invite the member of Congress to your facility. Members of Congress love when they're back in district and state to tour local businesses and hear about what some of the issues you all are facing. So it's totally discretionary and up to you. And if it's something you are interested in, please don't hesitate to do so. So this year, we're going to have our caucus reception in the Capitol Visitor Center. You can get to the Capitol's Visitor Center from either the Senate office buildings or the House office buildings if you have a staff member accompany you through the tunnels. So in your last meeting, if it's going very well and you feel comfortable asking, you can certainly say to the staff member in the meeting, hey, we're walking over to the Capitol Visitor Center. Could a staff assistant or an intern walk us over, and more likely than not, they're going to say yes. For those that are outside or don't feel comfortable asking, the entrance is here. So this is First Street, and this is East Capitol. Here, this is the Library of Congress, the Supreme Court. So two very distinctive buildings to help guide you. There's two big sloping staircases here where these arrows are. You go down those, you pass through security. They're going to ask you why you're there. You'll say, I'm going to the RV caucus reception. They'll direct you down once you're passed through security to a check-in desk. The check-in desk will again ask you why you're there. You'll tell them, and then they're going to ask you for ID. The vast majority of folks will be flying in, so you'll already have your ID, but please do double check. And then we'll have somebody at the front desk to walk people back into the room. It's a really, the visitor center is a really beautiful space. And from a logistics point of view, it makes a little more sense for us because senators don't like to cross all the way over to go to the House for receptions, and House members don't like to go all the way to the Senate for reception. So equidistance for all speakers, which we hope will entice more to attend and come come speak with us. Couple questions we often hear. Do I have to memorize every aspect of each issue? Absolutely not. The talking points are there as an educational tool and a guiding tool, right? I think the most important aspect of these is asking for co-sponsorship. And again, in a couple of minutes, Sam and David will walk through that and some background. This should, it shouldn't, I don't want folks, we don't want folks to feel pressured, right? There's not, I assure you that you're not gonna like mess this up or set back our initiatives or anything like that. I can tell you that I've been in some pretty bad meetings throughout my career. And most, if not all, are recoverable. And so it's fine. You don't have to memorize every aspect of the issue. I think it's really important, depending on the meeting, to hit those asks, though. That's the real core of the issue. Are these the only issues that I can discuss during the meetings? These are the priority issues. I think it's important to note that these are the issues that we as the association are advocating for this year. I'm sure folks have individual issues that they are concerned about, focused on. I think the important aspect of that is that in these meetings, we're all representing the association. And so we want to stick as close to those issues as possible, but certainly feel free as an individual company to have conversations afterwards or, you know, in following weeks with members. But for the day, we really want to stay focused on association priorities. What kind of leave behind materials will there be? There will be our federal policy guide and then an invitation to attend the RV caucus reception that evening. Your guides will have full cohorts of both of those to get you through the day for the meeting. And again, federal policy guide mimics the issues that we're going to be talking about Wednesday. Will there be an app? We talked about that. There is an app for the rest of RVs Move America week. You probably got an email about that yesterday. Yap, highly recommend downloading that. It's great for scheduling and keeping track of all the events that happen Sunday, Monday, Tuesday during RVs Move America week. But for Wednesday, again, you'll be receiving calendar invites from Molly. When we'll be able to view our schedules, those invites will start going out next Thursday, the 30th. Who is my guide? That information will also be contained in the emails going out from Molly on Thursday. On Tuesday, June 4th, after lunch, we will have a training and meet your guide session so that guides and advocates can ask more questions and develop their plan of attack for Wednesday morning. What is the dress code and what should I bring? Dress code is business. Highly recommend comfortable footwear, especially. And I would also say, because as folks know who have done this before, you'll be walking around the Hill and back and forth between the House and Senate. Also would recommend limiting anything you have to take off in airport security. Most folks will probably go through security at least twice on Wednesday. So that's just a time saver. Okay, I'll stop there. I see one question in the Q&A, Chris, if you want to share that, and I'm happy to answer further questions, and then we'll turn it over to our issue experts.
Yeah, someone asked whether they could remove the Advocacy Day app that was used in previous years from their phone.
Yes, you can. We won't be using that. That was company specific. And this year, we've decided to go with Serini. So yes, you can remove that app. Okay. So with that, and please, if other questions pop up, please go ahead. And also, as always, don't hesitate to reach out to anybody on the team, myself, Chris, Sam, David, with any questions, and we'll get them answered for you. So these are our 4 policy asks for Advocacy Day. If you participated last year, you'll notice that a lot of them look very familiar. They should, hopefully it'll come back to you a little bit. But with that, I'll turn it over to Sam Rossi, our Director of Federal Affairs, to walk through the first 3 of those. Sam?
Great, thanks, Jason. And I did just see that we got one more Q&A. So in regards to business attire, are we good without a tie and jacket?
No, to be perfectly blunt with you. Please wear a jacket, and men should wear a jacket and tie, please. Yes.
All right, so I'm Samantha Rossi, the Director of Federal Affairs, and welcome to our asks. As Jason noted, some of these will look familiar, but there have been some updates and some changes. So even if you did this last year, there's still going to be some changes, new legislation, and other details to pay attention to. And there is something that is entirely new for this year. So one exciting new issue for all of you. But we'll start with the generalized system of preferences, which many of our veterans will recognize. We rely on the GSP program, as I'll say, the longest running US trade preference program, to import a very thin plywood known as Luan from Indonesia. Through the program, it is allowed to come in duty-free, and most RVs use this plywood, which is not domestically grown, and it cannot really be sourced elsewhere. If you are somebody who works with Luan or has access to Luan, I will say I carry around this little piece of it. And when I am having meetings on this issue, I will hand it to the staffer so that they can get a sense of what this specific product is and why it's so different from a regular plywood in its thinness, in how you can fix this kind of background or veneer to it and other issues. And it just helps tell the story. So do encourage you, if you have access to the product, feel free to bring it in and use a visual aid. The problem with Luan right now, as many of us know, is that there is currently an 8% tariff on this product because Congress allowed the Generalized System of Preferences program to expire at the end of 2020. We estimate that we as an industry are paying within 1 and 1.5 million each month that this is expired. So in recent history, this program has been renewed for about 3 years, which would put us already past the historic renewal period that we've been seeing. And so we've been pushing for a longer renewal, and some of you may remember that as one of our asks last year. Well, the good news is that this year we have some legislation in the House. We were pleased to see that the Generalized System of Preferences Reform Act, which was passed by the Ways and Means Committee, actually renews the program until 2030, and that is retroactive. So that is a 10-year renewal, and we and many of our members are thrilled to see that. We're also continuing our push to reform competitive need limitations. Those are those built-in import ceilings within the program that eliminate that duty-free access to the US market for products that exceed them, even if there's no domestic alternative or any concern that those imports harm a US industry. GSP benefits will terminate when that meets one of two thresholds: either imports of a certain product from a certain country account for 50% or more of the value, which we do hit just by virtue of our product being a tree that is grown in one area of the world, or a certain dollar value. In 2024, that cap was 215 million, and that has increased by $5 million annually. Both of those caps hurt us, and so last year, one of our asks was also to address and modernize these CNLs. So critically, the GSP Reform Act does make a couple of changes that we were asking for. Mainly, it increases that dollar threshold to 500 million for 2024. It's an annual increase of 2.5%, so that will keep it better on track with vacation and bring it up to more modern standards, ensuring that we do not think that we would run the risk of Luan hitting that threshold. It also does make a tweak to the volume threshold, but it does not remove it, which is what we had advocated for. Under the Act, the Super CNL language, which currently stipulates products exceeding 75% of total imports have any not made in the US waiver revoked, we'll have their GSP waiver revoked. It will now not apply to products with a not produced in the United States waiver, which is how we have been getting Luan back into the program despite hitting that volume threshold the past couple cycles. While we would have preferred to eliminate that threshold entirely, this will still help us. It means that should we receive that not produced in the US waiver, we will not automatically be dropped out of the program after 5 years. There's a lot of good news, but now it's time for the bad news, which is that we do have legislation, but it came out of Ways and Means on an entirely partisan vote, meaning only the Republicans in this instance did vote to move this legislation out of committee. The Democrats are not opposed to this legislation, and it does include many of their priorities, but they are insisting on attaching another unrelated trade provision to this package called trade adjustment assistance. For House Republicans, this is a complete non-starter, and they're not even willing to have the conversation. So this means that we'll need to find a handful of Democrats who can support the bill without the adjustment of what folks will refer to as TAA. And all that does is provide assistance to folks in the form of job search, help, and other aid who have lost their job due to the effects of international trade. So I will flag that if you find yourself in a Democratic office who pushes back because TAA was not a part of this package, you can simply return to the fact that our priority is full retroactive GSP renewal, and we're talking to folks on both sides to try and find a way to move this things forward. You don't need to feel like you can get into a discussion about the merits of TAA or other provisions. Just focus in on our priorities and stick to the talking points. So all that being said, this year's ask is to support HR 7986, the GSP Reform Act, which retroactively reauthorizes the GSP program until 2030 and contains long overdue updates to CNL thresholds, providing RV businesses more certainty to continue investing in people and products. Moving on, we will jump to another familiar issue here, and that is our floor plan bill. Many of our veterans will remember this as well from the past couple years. So, just pay attention to our new bills, but you guys know most of the talking points by now. For those of you who don't, I'm still going to give a quick overview here. So the current definition of motor vehicle, as you can see in the tax code, inequitably impacts certain segments of the RV industry. So floor plan financing is a specialized type of loan that RV dealers use to purchase inventory from the manufacturers. And as with any loan, when they secure this financing, they are required to pay interest on it. Our issue lies in the section of the tax code addressing the deductibility of these business expenses. So prior to the passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, which you'll hear abbreviated TCJA, floor plan interest was fully deductible as a business expense for both towable and motorized RVs. However, TCJA introduced new limitations on interest deductibility, limiting it to 30% of the dealer's adjusted taxable income. They included an exception to this 30% cap for motor vehicles, and the definition of motor vehicle formerly included RVs specifically under the term recreational vehicle. However, during the negotiations surrounding the final language, the definition of motor vehicle removed the RV term from the list and became the following: any self-propelled vehicle designed for transporting persons or property on a public street, highway, or road, a boat, or farm machinery or equipment. Some of you may remember, and some of you may have noticed just by me reading out that definition, that excludes towables entirely, which make up about 85% of our units. And so that makes ineligible for this exception. The good news is we know that it was unintentional, that the drafters of the bill did believe that they were including all RVs and weren't using this as some sort of pay for the legislation, but that unfortunately does not matter to the law that applies now. Another thing I will flag is that this doesn't apply to all dealers, but it does apply to businesses with an average annual gross receipt of $26 million or more. And any disparity that we see between the motorized and towable units, not to mention competition with other outdoor recreation products that are fully eligible, like boats, will just become more and more problematic with interest rates increasing. A final thing that I will...
How will our advocates know if an office is already a co-sponsor of the bills?
I believe that will be included in our calendar invites coming from Molly.
That's correct.
So even more important to make sure that we're all accepting those calendar invites. So one final thing that I'll add here, just as far as the political landscape we're in right now, is that while there is a tax package you may have heard about that made its way from the House to the Senate, this provision was not included despite our best efforts. But that package has also, for all intents and purposes, stalled in the Senate at this point. However, it's still critical for us to consider to gather co-sponsors and educate legislators on this issue, because next year, many individual provisions of TCJA will expire, meaning that Congress is going to have to act to keep them in place. So this will offer maybe our best opportunity yet to get this handled, but we will have a new Congress coming in at the start of the year. So it's really vital that we have folks ready to reintroduce and co-sponsor as early as possible so that we're part of the conversation as that package is taking place. So this year, as in the past, our ask is to please co-sponsor our bills in the House and Senate. In the House, you'll see that it's HR 3624. And in the Senate, you'll see that it is S3345. So that is one that you will just need to tailor based on whether you're in a House or Senate office. And moving on to our new issue. So I'm excited because this is the first time in a few years I've gotten to talk about something new with everyone. But this is another trade issue. It's becoming more and more of a buzzword and a problem that we're hearing about, and it was brought to us last year by some of our aftermarket folks. But de minimis is a duty-free importation loophole so that international businesses can avoid heavy taxes and tariffs. which has unfortunately resulted in some lower quality products competing in the RV market aftermarket sector against our US products. It allows duty-free importation of merchandise valued at $800 or less, which is directly shipped from abroad to the US to a single consumer. The name comes from Latin originally, which means about minimal things, which was intended to refer to something too minor to consider. But unfortunately, what was too minor to consider has become a major issue with the advent of Amazon, Shein, Temu, and some of these other large Chinese companies. There's also an emerging industry that's built up in neighboring countries like Mexico to exploit this loophole. It'll urge US companies to relocate operations and allow Chinese companies to store products just across the border so that they can ship that product Amazon Prime to the consumer in 1 to 2 days and compete even in shipping with domestic folks. This trend does threaten US jobs and economic stability and has been costing RV businesses millions each year in lost sales. The current system hasn't just cost these businesses dollars, but it's also resulting in potentially poorer experiences for consumers who, when they're looking at that Amazon results page, they might not realize that they are purchasing a poorer quality product that's generally coming over from China. So while lowering the dollar threshold from that $800 that I mentioned before is a viable option, we estimate that roughly 75% of RV products affected by de minimis retail for $100 or less. So that threshold would have to be significantly reduced and placed more in line with other countries. For example, Canada's de minimis level is $20 and China's, funnily enough, is $7. So we also have a bill on this, the End China's De Minimis Support Act, which would ban products subject to 301 tariffs, 232 tariffs, and other trade actions from using the de minimis loophole. This would effectively ban, they say, 3/4 of imports from China immediately, but it is one of the weaker options that were on the table. Again, as far as the political reality, this bill did come out of the Ways and Means Committee with the GSP renewal package. However, Democrats also refused to support this legislation due to lack of that trade adjustment assistance or TAA issue I mentioned before. But this is a priority for Democrats, including one of their leadership members, Ranking Member Earl Blumenauer on the Trade Subcommittee, who ran a stronger bill on this issue. So this is something that does have bipartisan support, and that is a good ask for both Democratic and Republican offices. So understanding that, the Ways and Means chairman, Jason Smith, only thinks he has the votes for what he came up with here, which is that End China's De Minimis Support Act, but recognizing that Blumenauer and many others would like to push more aggressively against China, our ask this year is going to be to support the End China's De Minimis Support Act as a first step, but that Congress must go further to prevent China from undermining American businesses by taking more aggressive steps, such as significantly lowering that dollar threshold or even excluding China from the program. Next, I will turn things over to David Gardner, our Manager of Federal Affairs, to discuss our outdoor recreation priorities.
Thanks, Sam, and thanks to all of you for being on the webinar. My name is David Gardner. I am the Manager of Federal Affairs. We are psyched to see all of you in a couple weeks. So on to the topic of America's Outdoor Recreation Act, also called AORA, and its House companion legislation, the Explore Act. So this legislation is a first of its kind comprehensive recreation package, which will improve the visitor experience at federal public lands, help to create rural jobs, and increase access to federal public lands. The legislation will provide technical and financial assistance for outdoor recreation businesses and gateway communities, such as private campgrounds, which will allow them to better leverage the high levels of visitation that we've seen over the past few years. The legislation also extends federal land shoulder seasons to spread out demand and create more RV camping opportunities. And then finally, It also will bring broadband to front country campgrounds and establish partnership agreements, such as agreements with private operators to manage public campgrounds, to sustainably modernize federal public campgrounds to improve the RV camping experience. So these are just some of the numerous long sought changes within this legislation. This is a first of its kind comprehensive recreation package that we're really excited about. The good news on this is that we are really close on this. So last month, the House passed the Explore Act with unanimous support. It was a good moment on the floor. There were members talking about how this should be the model going forward for legislation. And last year, the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee unanimously passed this legislation out of committee. So as things stand, we have a bill that's passed out of the House and we have a bill that's passed out of the Senate committee. And we've been working with committee staff and leadership to help bridge any divide and technical differences. So for that reason, we have similar but slightly nuanced asks for both the House and the Senate. So in the House, we're going to ask that you thank offices for voting to pass the Explore Act and ask them to please continue to support a comprehensive outdoor recreation package and encourage their leadership and committee leadership to continue to work on this legislation and make sure it becomes law. And then in the Senate, we're going to ask that you ask offices to please support the passage of either S 873, which is AORA, or its companion legislation, HR 6492, the Explore Act, which is the House bill. Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything. Chris has been leading this effort for a while.
That was a great job, David. Appreciate it. If folks have any questions on the asks around Explore or AR, please feel free to reach out. But as David mentioned, we're really excited in how far this bill has come over the last couple of years, and the benefits that it will have for the RV camping community. There is one question from our advocates. For the issues that only have House bills like de minimis, how do we approach the ask in the Senate office?
It's a great question, and I appreciate that. From our perspective, there's only benefit to mentioning the issue. Right? This is we'll use de minimis as an example, but it's true for the other issues as well, right? There is not, for example, a GSP reauthorization bill in the Senate. We don't know if there will be. So it's only beneficial for them to hear that our point of view on the issues. You're not going to walk into any of these offices, or many of them, that won't be familiar with de minimis, with GSP. These are high profile issues. And so there's only benefit to mentioning it. And you can just say, we're supportive of the GSP bill in the House. We're supportive of the de minimis bill in the House, with the caveats that Sam talked about. So only benefit to mentioning them, even if there's not a specific Senate bill yet.
Thanks, Jason. One more question came through. Can we get the slide deck after the presentation?
Yeah, so this is being recorded, and we will send it out with both the presentation and the slide deck as well. Okay. Well, I want to again thank everybody for taking the time today and in a couple of weeks to travel to DC. As you can see, the team has been working diligently and tirelessly to get these bills moving forward. Sam raised a good point. I said at the beginning, some of this stuff might look familiar, but importantly, there's been a lot of progress made by our team, by the folks here today, to get us to this point, to get us close on this outdoor rec package, both Chris and David, to get a GSP bill that we can support and be happy to support with some of these CNL reforms. Sam deserves a lot of credit for that. And then a continuous push on floor plan, which is important to note. It's just us. It's the RV industry that is focused on this. So it falls to us to get it over the finish line, and then taking on a new issue that is, as Sam pointed out, really important to our members when it comes to de minimis reform. So my thanks to Chris and Sam and David for their work, their continued work to keep moving these pieces of legislation forward. And my thanks to all of you for your time today, for your questions, and for joining us in DC in a couple of weeks. I won't take David's term and say psyched, because I think I'm too old to say psyched at this point in my life, but we are very excited to have you all in DC in a few weeks. And thank you again for your time. Have a great rest of your day.